Welcome to the Hay Kings podcast, brought to you by Krone, dedicated to hay and forage producers. On today's episode, I'm joined by Dan Funke. Dan's out of Larchwood, Iowa, and that's in the northwest corner. Is that correct?
It's in the far northwest corner, yep. It's
Gotcha.
about as far as you can get.
Gotcha. Tell us about your operation. Just the big picture.
Well, the big picture is we focus on high-quality feed. I bale a lot of it and wrap it as baleage very intentionally that way. And then also we do custom work, provide mowing and merging for dairies that have their own forage harvesters. That keeps us pretty busy, and from the time the feed starts growing until the time it quits. In the fall, there's corn residue. We do bale some corn stalks too.
You're nice on your balers.
Yeah.
Silage and corn stalks.
Exactly. Yeah. I'm every manufacturer's nightmare, I guess.
Oh boy. Let's talk through that process. There's not a lot of folks doing large square bale silage. How does that process differ from traditional mowing and baling?
This whole thing was born of necessity here because our climate doesn't allow us to make dry hay successfully. It would be a once in a while thing that you'd get lucky and actually accomplish that. So I started dabbling with bale wrappers in around 2010. I already had a large square baler because I was working with trying to get feed to dry by conditioning or fluffing or whatever other means you could think of, and still really wasn't doing a very good job of it. So I tried a couple different bale wrappers with marginal success, but I didn't give up on the concept. And ultimately we ended up with these McHale 998s that we ran 10 years now that are kind of the Cadillac of the wrapper world. So I guess that's what it's about, is finding a process that gives you consistently high feed quality.
And when you say high feed quality, you're talking about alfalfa, correct?
Mostly alfalfa, but we bale, we'll bale a bunch of rye here in the spring, bale some oats, doing some summer annuals now. So sorghum, pearl millet, things like that. The quest is for a good source of digestible fiber. Seems like dairies are screaming for that in addition to just good alfalfa. Either is a good viable option. It seems like our ability to analyze forages has gotten really good here. It just keeps getting better. I feel like it's far less random than what it used to be for what their demands are. Really good alfalfa is one thing, but really good digestible grasses are pretty desirable too.
I want to put a point on this. I think this is contemporary nutrition. That fiber digestibility is what the industry is working on and talking about right now. How do you get to that fiber digestibility? That's the easy question.
I think it is really pretty simple. You just got to get your crop cut before it gets too mature. So with grasses, that means no heads. I think we've kind of always known that to some degree, but again, I think it's our ability to run these forage tests that tell the story now. A lot of your labs around the country they just keep evolving and getting better at giving us a quantifiable result, that says, yeah, this feed's going to work. Every year you think, well, I don't know what I'm going to do better this year. And then you come up with something that leaves the dairyman smiling and wanting more.
But the relationship here is the higher the fiber digestibility, the greater the dry matter intake. So the animals are able to eat more when the quality is higher.
I believe that's part of it. I wish I had my favorite nutritionist sitting here next to me because he could smile and nod when I'm talking to verify that what I say is true. It seems to me that cows have a rumen, and you want to have that floating layer of fiber on top of that in order to keep their tummy happy. And if you don't have that, you're going to have issues with DAs and stuff, I believe. So you want to have that amount of fiber in the diet, an adequate amount of fiber in the diet. Well, that fiber, if it isn't, you can use straw, but then there's no value in it. I think, we used to see dairies feed a pound of straw or whatever to meet that need. And we're just not seeing that anymore. They want something that's going to be digestible, a fiber source that is digestible. And like we said, our ability to measure that is a key thing. And it's sort of changed the scope of their demands for feed. Alfalfa can be tricky. We get it too high of testing and it doesn't have the fiber content in it. You know, if you're cutting that pre-bud stuff, you're kind of dancing on a fine line there of something that's not quite going to work. But if you can we've kind of stumbled into some things off and on. If you can bring a good source of digestible fiber in some pearl millet or some sorghum, Sudan, or oats, we've had really crazy good luck with oats, and bring that in and feed it alongside some really high testing alfalfa, it seems to give us the best of both worlds, where we get outstanding milk production and we don't lose out on components. You know, that's another thing, you know, with the really high testing alfalfa, cows will milk like crazy, but it seems like the butterfat and protein levels aren't as good. And we all know they're getting paid for that too. What we've kind of seen is a shift toward not feeding just alfalfa, but if we can feed some of these other products alongside of it, we really do well.
Good deal. The equipment that you're using in your operation, start to finish, what do you have?
We use, I have two Krone Big M 450s to cut with. Been with Krone and the Big M since 2010, started with an M2. I had a few of those and also a 420. And then when they brought the 450 around, I at first didn't think it was a good fit because of the head size. And I don't know, it just...
Now, how wide is that?
That's 36 feet, and there's 3 12-foot heads.
That's what I need for my controlled traffic.
There you go. Perfect.
Hey, Krone.
Well, get them to bring you one, I'm sure. They'll happily sell one to just anybody right away. So, yeah, they made a lot of changes to the 450, you know, in response to what our demands here in the U.S. are. You know, the machine was obviously a European deal to begin with, and they're slowly evolving, but they seem to really take a look at what we need here for this one and answer that. Obviously, that productivity on them is really good. When I send two of them out together, it's not uncommon to cut 100 acres an hour. You get over a lot of land fast, and we typically do run them together. But sometimes, you know, if we're at a dairy where they're going to chop, they don't want it cut down too quick, or it can get away from them. So then maybe only one machine runs there and one someplace else or whatever. But after we get it mowed down and get it to a desired moisture, we bring it back together with ox-bow mergers. I got 4 of those. They've been terrific. I've put them through a lot of misery, and we just kind of keep going through them and making them work. You'd have a really hard time getting me to change from that at this point. They've been good. They've been really good. When I get it merged for myself, I bale it with I have a Krone 1290 HTP2. That's the 8-string high-capacity baler. Has a cutting rotor in it, so we're processing while we're baling. The goal being to pack as much hay as we can into a package for better feed quality. We can get as much as 25 pounds per cubic foot in a bale, which is pretty outstanding. I think that makes some of the dairy guys a little envious because they have a hard time getting their bunkers packed that tight with the big tractors.
I was going to say that if you're packing in a bunk, like that's kind of the threshold that you want to get to.
I don't think they can even get that high. I'm not sure, but I don't think they quite get that high. I should ask somebody, but I know they do a lot of measuring to make sure that they are getting as much as they can.
Oh, yeah.
But for us, there's another reason, you know, wrap efficiency. You know, it takes $10 worth of wrap to wrap a 3x4 by 6 foot bale. So the more I can pack into it, the further I can stretch that wrap, and the fewer bales I have to clean up too. So the progression is this: I started with just a standard density baler without a cutter. We were typically getting 1,300 pounds of dry matter per bale. Then I went to a cutter baler, and that was mostly for having it processed. That was the demand of the customer base, was having processed feed. But that gained us a little bit of dry matter, about 15% more per bale. Kind of figured out that, gee, if we run a high density baler, maybe we can do a little better yet, you know?
Uh-huh.
after just about a season and a half with the cutter baler, I went to a high density cutter baler. And I think I ran maybe 3 of them before we took it a step further and went to the one that we have now. Yeah, the 8-stringer. It's crazy what that thing will do. You know, it forces you to buy a bigger tractor, because if you're gonna utilize the capacity of it, it's just a monster.
Let's take a break there and we'll get a word from our sponsor.
What's up, Hey Kings? You have a lot of choices when it comes to sourcing your equipment parts, but have you tried Messick's? We have $20 million in equipment parts on our shelves, and we pick up from C&H Parts Depots daily. All this inventory is available with same-day shipping with no upcharges or expediting fees. Messick's.com has exclusive features like transparent pricing, photos of parts, fit verification, alternative part options, and an obsolete part search tool alongside the manufacturer's drawings, so you're not guessing at what you need. We cover all the top brands, including New Holland, Case IH, Kubota, Krone, and Peckway, and more, all from our website. Our online tools are backed by 60-plus parts professionals who are just a call away, ready to find even the most obscure parts. So whether you're a seasoned farmer or a weekend enthusiast, think Messick's for a convenient and professional part shopping experience. Visit us at Messick's.com or call our parts hotline at 877-260-3528.
Messick's, a helping hand with your land.
It takes horsepower, is what you're saying.
Yeah, it takes horsepower. You know, if you run just a high density, a standard high density baler, you know, 250 horse will get you a long way. You probably do fine, but you're only traveling 6 miles an hour. And with this thing, you know, I'm typically running 10 to 11 miles an hour in usually 1 to 1.2 ton per acre hay. So that's kind of the goal. Get it gobbled up quick. It seems like the next rain is always right around the corner, and the quicker you can get it off the field and get bales picked up, then your next crop's growing. And I've entertained different ideas. It's like, all right, well, this baler's really expensive, so what else could I do? How could I do this differently? Well, you know, we've talked about round bales. We've talked about maybe running 2 balers or 3 balers. Ultimately, none of those ideas have a lot of appeal. I hate handling round bales. They don't stack nice. They don't store nice. They don't truck nice compared to squares. I've done a few in the past. I used to have a silage round baler around just for a backup. The dairies don't like them as much. So I don't know. This is kind of what we stuck with. And it's going to be really hard to, especially with all the efficiency that you gain with the wrap side of it, it would be hard to look at anything else. So that's why we're here. That's what we're doing.
You're talking about several $1 million worth of equipment, but there's a reason for that, right? Looking at the operational benefits, your input costs, is it all worth it?
Is it all worth it? I don't know. That's a good question. You know, I ponder this all the time. You know, do I kind of keep doing this forever, you know, or what happens when I want to retire someday? Do I do it on a smaller scale? You know, and I don't have an answer for that. What I do know is that my customer base demands high quality feed. I don't know how accepting they would be of anything less. We set the bar kind of high here anymore. I mean, bottom number is usually around 200. You know, I'm shooting for 2.25 feed all the time.
That's relative feed value that you're talking about there.
Well, it's relative feed quality.
Oh, RFQ. Okay.
Yeah, RFV doesn't really tell the whole story anymore.
Because it doesn't have
RFQ,
the fiber component.
Yeah.
Yep.
Right. RFQ does a better job of that, so that's the number we use. Obviously, if you're going to have that kind of equipment, you have to cover a lot of acres and make a lot of feed. I don't know how I would do a lot of feed without that equipment.
I gotcha. I want to ask why you're running Krone. Because in my perception, and I don't have the market share data sitting in front of me, but in my perception, Krone's not winning on market share in the U.S. There's places where they are, but not in the U.S.
Well, there's a couple of reasons for that. You know, I kind of started with them. The first large square baler I had was a New Holland. That goes back a long ways. That was like a 1999 model. The first upgrade I did was to a Krone, but again, that was a standard density non-cutter baler. Getting that here was part of an effort on Krone's part to get some market share in this immediate area. We had a brand new dealer at the time that is 10 miles away from my house, so that's pretty handy. They put a lot of effort into getting that process going and supporting it. As I grew into what I'm doing, they also grew into their dealer, here, and Faber's Farm Equipment was just getting the ball rolling themselves at the time, and we just kind of grew together with it. But I think maybe more important than that, I don't know of anything else out there that will do what I'm doing with the density part of it and the capacity. Those are pretty important things. If I did, do less volume, significantly less volume, I suppose I would probably revert back to, a round bale. It'd be slower. A lot of those round balers can make a pretty nice dense bale. I would never go back to try and make dry hay. Not here. I'm hooked on quality feed. So it's an addictive drug. So
Hooked on quality feed. We just found the title for the episode.
I think so. Yeah, the process is a win here. I don't care what you're putting in a windrow and making a bale out of. Trying to get it dry and have a good end result is just not reliable enough for me here. I think you're part of the world. It's a completely different game. And
yeah,
I can't, I can't tell you how many times I've thought about moving, But,
well, I'll tell you, in my part of the world, we do silage, we do dry hay, sometimes we need steamers, sometimes we need wrappers. And
sure,
that's terrible because you never have what you need.
Yeah. Well,
you can't have it all. It doesn't make sense. Where you've dedicated yourself to the silage operation because of your environment, it sounds like you have a really good setup.
Well, and that's a little misleading when you say silage or baleage specifically, because a lot of what we do really isn't carrying a whole lot of moisture. It's not dry enough to be dry, but it's not necessarily silage either. When you bale at 20%, it'll come out of the bale looking exactly like it went in. There's no fermentation. There's no change to it. So
I did some of that this last fall where, even if you go up to 30%, it's pretty well coming out just like it went in.
Generally, yes. Yep. Especially 25 on down, you can pretty much count on it's not going to change. And I don't know, that's kind of the goal around here, is to bale it at that moisture, just because it works. It's cheaper trucking it. I don't have to haul all that far, but why haul 40% material around if you don't have to? And that's part of the magic of this system compared to haylage. We do a lot with these dairies making haylage, and I've come to figure out that what we do is actually a lot easier to make good feed. Haylage, you've got that moisture parameter, 50 to 60%. You get below that and you start losing quality fast, because you got that green cloud following the cutter around, and now that's not going in the bunk. So I guess from where we sit, I'm a lot happier with this. I know there's people out there that are harvesting their own feed as haylage and then selling it and delivering it to dairies, and that's a good system too. But there's a downside of that. You're delivering everything in a live bottom. What's your choice? And you're hauling moisture. They're hauling 30-40% more weight. That's nothing. When I hear criticisms of baleage with, all the plastic and dealing with the wrap, and yeah, it's not fun. It's definitely a negative. We don't deal with some of the other negatives of haylage either, which is an open face on a bag or a pile. You have to be feeding off of that all the time, or you've got shrink there that you're dealing with. Yeah, the battle against shrink is real, isn't it?
Let's take a break there and we'll get a word from our sponsor.
Livestock prefer palatable hay, and great bales require two things: high-quality crop and superior harvesting tools. Krone has you covered with the most reliable equipment so you can focus on the crop. Start your season with an added sense of security when you buy a new Krone. Now through May 31st, when you buy a new Krone mower, tedder, or rake, you can turn 1 year of warranty into 2 for free. See your local Krone dealer for details. I didn't have my mind wrapped around the moisture content that you're baling at. I need more explanation on your process now, hearing that you're baling in that kind of 20% window.
Here's what we do. If we've got, the hay is going to get cut when it needs to be cut. usually regardless of, unless it's actually raining, but we get it cut down and we can leave it lay for, maybe 2 days or 3 days or whatever kind of opportunity we look like we have. I really like it to dry down to, maybe 20% or 25% or whatever that might be. And then I do my merging always in the morning. We don't even worry if it's dripping with dew moisture. We still go merge. And usually by the middle of the afternoon or by early afternoon, the dew moisture is mostly gone except for what's trapped down in the windrow. And it is what it is. Doing it like that really just dramatically cuts down on your leaf loss. That's where I think we're able to get better quality a lot of times than a haylage system, where when you're merging for a chopper, you're trying to catch it on the way down. And that can be a real challenge. You don't want to merge too soon because then you throw a bunch of 72% hay together and it just might stay that way.
Right. Right. Especially if you're talking 72 feet of windrow. Yeah.
Well, yeah. And that's what you're doing when you're merging for a chopper. They want 70, 80 feet, whatever in a windrow. And so you can't merge too soon. You can't merge too late. And that's a problem too, because, they don't want it in the 40s.
Right.
Obviously.
That's where your green cloud comes from, all your leaves following you around.
Yeah. Merging is always a challenge to get it done at just the right time. But the way we're doing it, it just makes it so much easier because I can go out with 4 mergers at, 5 o'clock in the morning. And by late morning, we got, 300 acres put together or whatever. And we've just really been able to keep that leaf loss under control most of the time. Once in a great while, we get a day where we don't have dew. That's challenging, but that's really not very common. So,
you're talking to a West Coast guy that sleeps in his truck waiting for dew. So I know just exactly what you're talking about.
I think maybe that's why I never moved out there. That whole sleeping in the truck deal just doesn't have any appeal.
There's ways around it, but again, that's more equipment and investment and Yeah. No, it's rough. You're doing something that nobody else is doing. Or, not nobody else, but very few other people are running that Krone HDP2. I've seen some folks call it sweet hay, right?
Yep.
That's relatively unique in the haymaking world. So I think this is a great story.
It's also unique in that, like I said before about the capacity of it, we can gobble up hay just about as fast as a 900 horse forage harvester in most cases. So a lot of people from a capacity standpoint will look at baleage and say, well, that's just too slow. We're going to chop. And the reality is it's not. And it allows you a little bit of flexibility from a labor side too. If you're going to chop hay, you are going to need, 2 people running mergers. You're going to need a cutter guy. You're going to need 5 trucks. And you're going to need a couple pack tractors, and everybody's got to all be there at the same time. With baleage, if we have to, I can go to the field with a baler and 2 wrappers, and the feed's put away. That being said, that leaves you with a field covered in wrapped bales, which we are trying to get away from that a little bit. My 3rd wrapper is actually not a McHale 998. It's a stationary. It's a Gowiel Q4020 or something that we got last year. And you park that in the yard, bring the bales to it. And that seemed always cumbersome to me over the years. But once we started doing it, it's nice because you're sending a fork to the field to pick bales up instead of having to handle wrapped bales, which is
harder.
It's
more likely to damage them. Yep.
You got to be careful. And we're seeing far fewer, almost 0 damaged bales coming out of a stack, because when you're handling a wrapped bale multiple times, there's just more opportunities to damage the plastic. And I have a herd of cows, so if there's a damaged bale, it's not totally wasted. There's a home for it. But just the same, you'd like to avoid that. I think, for us, the stationary machine won't be going away. There's still definitely a call for the McHales running around the field, but it's just going to depend on the circumstance, on every specific deal, really.
Right. Having some flexibility. Absolutely.
Yeah. On one hand, it looks like way too much money invested in bale wrappers, ultimately I'm going to have two of them here no matter what. There's no way I would not have two. You know, you're talking about a machine that's made in Europe, and parts aren't necessarily hard to get, and we keep a pretty good inventory here, but you know, you got to have a backup at a minimum. You're not just going to go buy a wrapper any place either that's going to do what you want it to do. So I figured out how to import my own from across the pond a few years back. So that's kind of how we do that. But
Dan, this has been a wonderful conversation, and I want to say thank you. Again, we've been joined by Dan Funke out of Larchwood, Iowa. He has a different take on baling hay, and I've learned a lot, and I appreciate your time today.
thanks.
I want to say a special thank you to Krone for sponsoring the podcast, and I want to say thank you to Messick's for advertising on the podcast. They help make all of this possible. I want to say thank you to Nick Palmieri at Palmieri Sound for doing the audio editing, and Jessica Palmieri for doing our social media coordination.